Half-dressed Oriental beauties drowning in luxury, almighty lords, music, sweets, man's haven on earth, so to say. So, we will spend one day in the harem and find out what was life in the harem for women, a golden cage, a prison, or a way to make a career. How did beautiful concubines look like? What were they really doing all day long? Meet Nazib-Khanum, a concubine of the Sultan. Nazib is a Circassian, so they called everybody who came here from the Caucasus. Her parents themselves gave her to the harem. It was considered an excellent opportunity for a girl. Nazib got through a meticulous selection process. She must be not only incredibly beautiful, but also intelligent. After the arrival, she was examined by a doctor and a midwife at first, because all the girls entering the harem had to be in a perfect health. On the first night, they also checked whether the candidate snores or talks in her sleep. But she passed all the tests and entered the harem. Do you think she would spend half a day staying in bed without any hurry? You are deeply mistaken. She lived on a strict schedule like most harem residents. She got up early in the morning at 5 a.m. At this time, the sultans and favorites were still asleep. After morning prayers, Nazib went to the hammam, cleaned herself up, she had about an hour for all this, and went to school. Yes, you heard it right, to school. Scientists compare a harem to an English-style girls' school or a convent. No matter how the girls got into the harem, they all had to go through a mill. The duration of training depended on the girl's age. The end of training coincided with adolescence. It took about 2 years. Girls had classes for 6-7 hours 6 days a week, and an hour after school was given for homework. You could ask, what is there to learn? Just imagine, at the court of the Emir of Bukhara, there were 300 beauties, and in the harem of Topkapi, 1,200. To stand out from a crowd and attract the lord's attention, girls had to study hard and well. And it is not what you think. Concubines were supposed to be smart conversationalists too. All the girls studied the Quran. They were taught dancing, playing instruments, having conversation, also making calligraphy, needlework, court etiquette, and of course they had to know all the preferences of the lord. Each slave had to know how to pour rose water, how to bring his shoes, serve him coffee or sweets, fill a pipe or put on a cloth. The ability to compose poems and sing was especially appreciated. Of course, they were taught how to pleasure a man. Modest and quiet girls became professional seductresses. The final exam after 2 years was taken. Just don't be surprised by the Sultan's mother, Valide Sultan, the first person in the harem. There were no retakes. If a girl failed, she worked as a kitchen maid or a janitor. If she got lucky and passed, she became a jariyeh, a potential concubine of the Sultan. I emphasize potential because the absolute majority of jariyehs had never ever been to the Sultan's bed. Nazib just have successfully passed the exam today and become a jariyeh. We used to think that concubines were rightless slaves. However, all of them received a salary. The lowest rank concubines received at least 6 silver ankh coins a day, or $18. The favorites who gave birth to the Sultan's sons received the most money. For example, Roxolana, who became a mother of 5 sons and 1 daughter, were paid 2,000 ankh, or $6,000 a day. This is more than $2 million a year, the income of a small province in France of that time. In addition to salaries, they got expensive gifts on special occasions. and the Sultan gave his women lands, villages, and estates. For some girls, the harem was a prison. For other ones, just don't be surprised, a great career chance. Girls from poor families went to harems by choice, hoping to win the favor of the Sultan. After all, the most beloved concubines got to the top of the harem hierarchy, especially if they managed to give birth to a son. Harem is not a Turkish word, but an Arabic, and means forbidden, sacred place, the female part of the house. By the way, not only Turkish sultans had harems, as we see in the TV series The Magnificent Century. Harems also existed in ancient Rome, China, and even in Russia. For example, Russian Prince Vladimir, who was known as Red Sun and the Baptist of Russia, had a harem. A career in a harem was the only possible career option for women in the East. So, famous Roxolana, who was a slave, became a Haseki Sultan, the wife of Suleiman. Those who got into the harem dreamed of becoming Gözde, with whom the Sultan spent at least a few nights. Even one night guaranteed increased allowance, more comfortable rooms, and several slaves. The number of Gözdes usually didn't exceed 100. If the Sultan liked her, she got a chance to become Iqbal, a favorite. There were relatively few of them. Mahmud I had 15 favorites, and Selim II had 9. Imagine how different were lives of the Iqbal favorites and other slaves. If they gave birth to a son or daughter to the Sultan, they became Kadins. Kadin means woman or mother, harem celestials, and the happiest had the honor to become Sultan's wives, Kadin Effendi. By the way, according to Sharia law, their number should be no more than 4. Let's go back to our Nazib, concubine of the Sultan. You may say, well, she passed the exams, now it is time to rest. That is what a pampered concubine is supposed to do. Now, she had much work. Clean up the palace, sweep, wash. Ordinary odalisks spend a lot of time cleaning. Harems in TV series and books are shown as richly decorated rooms with fountains, silk, and elegant trinkets. In fact, the harem consisted of small rooms and narrow dark corridors. Even the famous harem of Topkapi, which had about 400 rooms, 46 toilets, several baths, a laundry, a swimming pool, and a hospital, was far from what artists and filmmakers show. Although the harem occupied quite a large area, the concubines lived mostly in modest circumstances. Here is one of the hammam rooms for concubines. Looks like a public toilet. It is a similar room of sultans for comparison. But all this stuff was not easy to clean up. Most of the time they spent in a large room with access to fresh air. The girls also had access to the gardens, close to the harem. Half-naked ethereal creatures in Turkish pants and transparent dresses, Sultan's concubines looked that way in paintings. But those girls dressed in a thin veil were slaves. Their bodies should be seen so that the Lord didn't miss something important. So numerous slaves fluttered in heat and cold in transparent dresses, catching cold in drafty rooms. No wonder that the most common disease in the harem was pneumonia. And favorites and mothers of children wrapped themselves in furs and velvets, even in the heat. It was their privilege. By the way, in the Magnificent Century, women's clothing doesn't correspond to the era. It is more like the French fashion of the 19th century. What about Nazib-Khanum? So, she finished cleaning up. It is time for lunch and a nap. Those who wanted to relax could sleep for an hour, while other women were playing cards and backgammon, smoking hookah, reading books, or just having fun. However, they had to be quiet, so that the Kalfa wouldn't notice the noise in the harem rooms. At about 5 o'clock in the evening, the girls woke up and carried on with their work. Someone had to serve sultans, someone cleaned, looked after the children. All the women in the harem had their permanent jobs, except for the favorites and their maids, who had to fulfill all their wishes day and night. There is a misconception that women were eternal prisoners of harems and never left them. Harem beauties could visit their relatives, bazaars, parks, and went boating. Some ladies were even allowed to go on short vacations due to illness, when doctors recommended changing the climate to improve their health. It is considered that no one could get out of the harem. That is not true. There were a lot of applicants for the Lord's attention, but only one sultan. After 9 years, a girl to which the Lord didn't draw attention could receive the master's permission and go free. Her status of a free person was certified in writing. In this case, they usually found a good husband for her, bought a house, gave a considerable dowry, provided with regular payments from the treasury. The Ottoman nobles considered such a marriage a great success, because the former concubines were beautiful, wealthy, superbly educated, and with connections at court. It is a misconception that only the concubines and wives of the Lord lived in harems. All his female relatives lived here too, as well as numerous mentors, maids, and eunuchs assigned to protect and help. The management of the harem was always in the hands of sultans or shah's mother. Just imagine this nest of vipers. High level of passions, poisonings, multi-move intrigues, grouping and alliances. Every girl dreamed only about achieving the position of his beloved wife. In fact, they risked not only their nerves, but also their lives. Today they present Nazib to the Sultan, along with the other who had passed the exam. He might have noticed her during a walk or at a party where she served. Anyway, the Sultan had sent her a gift and flowers, which meant that he was expecting her tonight. So, Nazib had to clean herself up with the help of her servants and finally crawl on all fours to his bed, proving her submission, and kiss the edge of the sofa on which the master was lying. After a night spent with the Sultan, she would be rewarded and promoted for the harem hierarchy. The inhabitants of the harems of lords were not unhappy recluses. They had a well-provided life full of entertainment. The palaces had their own theaters, ballet companies, and orchestras. The entourage that surrounded each bride or wife provided a pampered young lady with total care like modern beauty salons. Manicure, pedicure, hairstyle, makeup, new outfits, and so on. Eunuchs couldn't replace the male society, but they animated female groups. Artists, musicians, teachers came to visit the ladies, and life was not monotonous. Games in the garden, walks, and other girlish amusements were allowed. One of the most famous inhabitants of the harem was Hurrem, known to history as Roxolana. According to legend, which is questioned however, she was a daughter of an Orthodox priest called Anastasia Lisovskaya. Another legend says that even a relative of the French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte lived in the harem. Aimée de Rivière, a French woman, was a cousin of his wife Josephine, who was captured by Algerian pirates in 1784 and sold in the slave market. The legend says that she became the mother of Sultan Mahmud II, but there are some inconsistencies in this legend. Well, what happened next to our protagonist? The Sultan paid no more attention to her, and a few years later they decided to marry her to the court pasha. She didn't like the groom, he was old, and the girl herself fell in love. In the palace garden she met a young Greek ambassador. He was not rich, and seemed to be thinking of an advantageous marriage with a courtier. But Nazib really fell in love. To fall in love with a Christian meant to be thrown into the waves of the Bosphorus in a bag with a cannonball. However, the cunning Greek organized an escape. During the holiday, Nazib got Greek clothes and left the palace with Greek guests, boarded a ship and left Turkey. She took several diamonds and other precious items that were given to her as a part of her dowry for a future wedding. In Greece, she married her lover. It seemed to be typical happy ending. However, this story evolved further contrary to the cinema rules. Her husband, for whom she risked everything, fled with all her treasures and ended his career in bankruptcy. Nazib was left alone with 12 children. As a result, she returned to the harem as an old woman in rags. And what would you think? They received her kindly, didn't reproach and supported her and her children for the rest of their lives. Do like and subscribe if you enjoyed this story. Oh, and click on the bell so you get notified when the new episode comes out.